The Kithara had always known they were the smallest sentient species in the known galaxy, standing barely 8 inches tall, with large golden eyes and soft, downy fur that shimmered like starlight. They had evolved on a world where being tiny meant survival. Their ancestors had hidden in flower petals and nested in hollow tree branches, developing intelligence as their primary defense against a world full of giants. Now, as their homeworld of Lyros burned behind them, the last 7,000 Kithara huddled in the cargo hold of their final evacuation ship. The vessel was a marvel of miniaturization technology, no larger than what most species would consider a shuttle, yet it housed their entire remaining civilization. Commander Zix stood on the bridge, her tiny paws gripping the control panel as she watched the destruction through the view screen. The harvester ships loomed like metal mountains against the dying light of their sun. These mechanical giants had appeared without warning, strip-mining planets with ruthless efficiency. They consumed everything: rock, water, atmosphere, and any life unfortunate enough to be in their way. "Status report," Zix whispered, her voice barely audible even to her own crew. "The harvesters have consumed 70% of Lyros," reported Navigation Officer Pip, his whiskers twitching with fear. "Our fuel reserves are at 12%. Long-range sensors show no habitable worlds within our remaining range." Zix closed her enormous eyes. The Kithara had tried everything. They had sent diplomatic messages to the harvesters, no response. They had attempted to hide their cities underground. The machines dug deeper. They had even tried to fight back with their microscopic weapons, but it was like trying to stop an avalanche with flower petals. The truth was simple and devastating. The Kithara were too small to matter. Other species in the galaxy had their own problems with the harvesters, but at least they could fight back meaningfully. The Kralliks with their battle fleets, the Gordak with their planet-killer weapons, even the peaceful Henari had massive shield generators that could protect their worlds. But what could the Kithara do? Their largest warship would be considered a fighter craft by most species. Their most powerful weapons barely scratched the hull of a harvester drone. "Commander," Science Officer Mira called from her station, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I'm detecting something on long-range sensors. It's strange." "Strange how?" Zix asked, though she felt little hope. "There's a small fleet of unknown ships. They're engaging a harvester force near the Epsilon relay. The energy signatures don't match any known species." Zix moved to the science station, her tiny feet making no sound on the deck. The display showed a cluster of ships that seemed almost primitive compared to the sleek vessels of most spacefaring civilizations. They were blocky, irregular, with odd protrusions and what appeared to be actual windows instead of proper view screens. "Are they winning?" asked Pip. Mira's ears drooped. "Unknown. The harvesters have them outnumbered 3-1. Conventional tactical analysis suggests the unknown ships should have been destroyed already. But..." She paused, tilting her small head. "They're still fighting. And somehow, they're not losing." For a moment, hope flickered in Zix's chest. Perhaps these strangers might be allies, or at least temporary refuge. But then reality crashed back down. Even if these unknown beings were friendly, why would they care about 7,000 tiny refugees? The Kithara had nothing to offer, no resources, no technology that wouldn't be considered quaint by larger species, no military might. "Set course for the unknown ships," Zix ordered anyway. It was better than drifting in space until their life support failed. "Commander," Mira said hesitantly, "should we prepare a first contact message?" Zix considered this. What could they possibly say? "Hello. We're a dying species of tiny, useless creatures. Please help us even though we can give you nothing in return. Prepare a standard greeting," she said finally. "Include our biological requirements and refugee status. Don't mention our size yet." As their ship limped through space toward the unknown fleet, Zix couldn't shake the feeling that they were simply delaying the inevitable. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, and there was no place in it for something as small and helpless as the Kithara. Through the view screen, she watched the strange ships continue their impossible fight against the harvesters. Part of her wondered what drove these beings to fight so hard against such overwhelming odds. The Kithara had given up quickly once they realized the futility of resistance. Why hadn't these strangers done the same? Hours passed as they drew closer to the battle. The unknown ships moved in ways that defied conventional tactics, sometimes retreating when they held the advantage, sometimes charging directly into superior firepower. Their weapons seemed less advanced than those of the major galactic powers, yet somehow they carved through harvester armor with surprising effectiveness. "Commander, communications officer," Len reported, his voice tight with anxiety. "We're receiving a transmission from one of the unknown ships. It's in our language." Zix blinked in surprise. "How is that possible? We've never made contact with these beings. They say they intercepted and decoded our earlier transmissions. They're requesting permission to come aboard." The idea of strangers on their ship was terrifying, but they had no choice. "Grant permission. Have them dock at Cargo Bay 7. It's large enough for most species." As she waited to meet these mysterious beings, Zix found herself hoping against hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the universe might hold some kindness for the Cathara after all. Though deep in her heart, she knew that hope was likely just another luxury her species could no longer afford. The docking clamps engaged with a gentle thud, and Zix made her way to the cargo bay, accompanied by her senior officers. Whatever happened next, at least the Cathara would face it with dignity. They might be small, they might be helpless, but they were still a proud people. The airlock cycled open, and Zix prepared to meet the beings who might be their last hope, or simply witnesses to their final chapter. The beings who stepped through the airlock were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They stood on two legs, averaged about 6 feet tall, and had skin that ranged from pale pink to deep brown. Their hair grew in various colors and textures, and their faces were remarkably expressive. But what struck Zix most was their eyes, not the size or color, but the way they looked around with obvious curiosity and intelligence. "Greetings," said the lead figure, whose voice was surprisingly gentle. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen, of the Earth Federation vessel Defiance. We received your distress signal." Zix stepped forward, acutely aware of how she barely reached the stranger's ankle. "I am Commander Zix of the Cathara refugee vessel Hope's End. We appreciate your response, but I should warn you that we may not be what you expect." Captain Chen knelt down, bringing her face much closer to Zix's level. The human's eyes widened as she took in the tiny commander's appearance, the golden eyes, the shimmering fur, the way Zix's ears twitched nervously. "Oh my God," Chen breathed. And for a moment, Zix feared the worst. "You're adorable." "Aw." Zix blinked, certain she had misunderstood the translation. Excuse me?" The other humans had gathered around now, and Zix heard a sound she had never encountered before, a collective intake of breath followed by soft exclamations. "Look at those eyes," whispered one of the humans. "Is that fur? It's like starlight. The little ears. They move." Zix felt overwhelmed. In all their diplomatic encounters, no species had ever reacted to the Cathara with anything other than dismissal or mild interest. These humans seemed genuinely excited just to see them. Captain Chen held out her hand, palm up, and spoke in an even gentler tone. "Commander Zix, would you mind if could you step onto my hand? I promise I'll be careful." Every instinct screamed at Zix to refuse. Trusting a giant species to hold you was usually a death sentence. But something about Chen's expression, earnest, almost reverent, made her reconsider. Slowly, carefully, Zix stepped onto the human's palm. Chen lifted her hand with movements so careful they seemed almost fearful. "Incredible," she murmured. "How much do you weigh?" About 12 ounces, Zix replied, amazed at how stable the human's hand was. "Like a hamster," said another human, a male with graying hair. "Doc, look at this." A woman with kind eyes and medical insignia approached. "Fascinating. The bone structure suggests they evolved from small mammals. The fur pattern indicates they might change color based on emotional state. See how it's shifting to silver around the edges? That's probably fear or stress. We need to get them somewhere safe," Chen said firmly. "How many of you are there?" 7,000, Zix said quietly. "We're all that remains of our species." 7,000. The effect on the humans was immediate and dramatic. Several of them looked stricken. One woman actually had tears in her eyes, and Captain Chen's jaw tightened with what looked like anger. "What happened?" Chen asked. Zix explained about the harvesters, about how her people had tried to fight and failed, about how they were simply too small to matter in a galaxy full of giants. As she spoke, she noticed something strange happening among the humans. Their expressions were shifting from sympathy to something harder, more determined. "Those mechanical bastards," growled the gray-haired man. "Captain, we can't let this stand." "No," Chen agreed, her voice taking on a tone that made Zix shiver. "We absolutely cannot." "But I don't understand," Zix said. "We're just refugees. We have nothing to offer you. Why would you care what happens to us?" Chen looked at her as if she had asked why water was wet. "Commander, on our homeworld, we have creatures that are much like you. Small, furry, with big eyes. We call them by many names. Cats, dogs, rabbits, hamsters. And do you know what we do with creatures like that? Eat them?" Zix asked hesitantly. The horrified expressions on the humans' faces made her realize that was very much the wrong answer. "We protect them," Chen said firmly. "We care for them. We love them. On Earth, humans have died defending creatures much smaller than themselves simply because they were, well, because they were adorable and needed help." Zix felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just hope, but a strange sense of disbelief. "You would help us because we're small and furry?" "Among other reasons," the doctor said with a smile. "Though I have to admit, the small and furry thing is a big factor for humans." Captain Chen stood slowly, keeping her hand perfectly steady. "Commander Zix, I want you to gather your people. We're taking you somewhere safe, and then we're going back to deal with those harvesters." "But there are hundreds of their ships," Zix protested. "Your fleet can't possibly." "Our fleet?" Chen laughed, though it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Commander, you've only met one ship from the Earth Federation. We have a lot more where this came from." As if summoned by her words, the ship's communications officer looked up from his station. "Captain, we're receiving confirmation from Admiral Rodriguez. The Third Fleet has just dropped out of hyperspace. 80 ships, ma'am." Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. "And, Commander, when humans find out that someone has been bullying adorable tiny creatures, when we learn that an entire species of beings who look like living teddy bears has been driven to near extinction?" She paused, and Zix saw something in the human's eyes that made her grateful these beings were on her side. "Well, let's just say the harvesters are about to learn why you don't mess with Earth's protected species." For the first time since the harvesters arrived, Zix felt something she had almost forgotten. The possibility that the Kithara might actually survive. And more than that, they might just have found the most dangerous protectors in the galaxy. The safe world the humans brought them to was called New Geneva, a planet that served as one of Earth's refugee processing centers. When the Kithara shuttle landed, Zix discovered that word of their species had somehow traveled ahead of them. Hundreds of humans had gathered at the spaceport, but instead of the aggressive crowd she feared, they stood in respectful silence. Many holding small gifts, flowers, tiny houses built to Kithara scale, and what the humans called care packages, filled with foods their scientists thought might be compatible. Dr. Martinez, the human xenobiologist assigned to help them, had tears in her eyes as she watched Kithara children emerge from the shuttle. "We've prepared accommodation in the miniature species habitat," she explained to Zix. "It's a facility we originally built for some of Earth's endangered small animals, but we've modified it for your people." The habitat was beyond anything Zix could have imagined. Tiny buildings scaled perfectly for her people, miniature parks with flowers the right size for Kithara to rest in, and everywhere, clear barriers that would keep them safe while allowing the humans to visit and help. It was beautiful, comfortable, and most importantly, it was theirs. But what struck Zix most was the attitude of the human staff. They spoke to the Kithara with the same careful gentleness humans apparently used with their beloved pets, but also with the respect due to intelligent beings. It was a combination Zix had never experienced. The fleet should reach Lyros in 18 hours. Captain Chen informed her as they stood in the habitat's main plaza. Chen had to lie on her stomach to get close to Zix's level, something she did without hesitation or embarrassment. "You're really going back?" Zix asked. "Even though our world is already mostly gone? It's the principle of the thing," Chen said firmly. "Besides, our intelligence suggests the harvesters are using Lyros as a staging ground for attacks on other systems. We can't let that continue." What Zix didn't know was that the moment news of the Kythera reached Earth, the human response had been swift and overwhelming. The images of tiny, furry refugees with large golden eyes had triggered something deep in the human psyche. Social media platforms crashed from the volume of posts demanding action. Politicians who suggested a measured response found their approval ratings plummeting overnight. The Earth Federation military, which had been dealing with the harvester threat through careful, strategic engagement, suddenly found itself under enormous pressure to end the threat immediately and completely. Admiral Rodriguez commanded the Third Fleet from her flagship, the EFS Righteous Fury. As they approached the Lyros system, she found herself looking at the intelligence photos of the Kythera refugees for the 100th time. Her own daughter had sent a message that simply said, "Mom, please tell me you're going to save the space hamsters." "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive harvester presence. Over 300 ships, with more arriving from what appears to be a mobile construction facility." Rodriguez studied the tactical display. Under normal circumstances, this would call for careful planning, possibly requesting additional support. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Signal the fleet," she commanded. Operation Teddy Bear is a go. The Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, and immediately the comm channels filled with human voices, expressing sentiments that would have baffled most galactic species. "This is Captain Morrison of the EFS Shield Wall. I've got 3 harvester cruisers bearing down on what used to be a Kythera city. That's not happening on my watch. Vengeance here, engaging harvester formation Delta. Nobody makes space hamsters homeless and gets away with it. Guardian, moving to protect the children's hospitals. Those tiny hospital ships are still down there." Admiral Rodriguez smiled grimly. She had served with human crews for 30 years, and she had seen them fight for resources, for territory, for ideology. But she had never seen them fight like they did when something small and helpless needed protecting. The harvesters, for their part, had expected another careful engagement like their previous encounters with human forces. They were not prepared for the absolutely ruthless assault that followed. Human ships threw themselves into harm's way to protect civilian evacuation routes that served beings they had never met. Pilots who would normally retreat to fight another day instead pressed attacks until their ships were smoking hulks, buying time for Kythera medical facilities to escape. "Admiral," the communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead harvester ship. They're requesting negotiations." "Put them through," Rodriguez said. The harvester voice was emotionless, mechanical. "Human fleet. Your interference is noted. We propose withdrawal. Your species gains nothing from this system." Rodriguez looked again at the photo of tiny Kythera children clinging to their parents in the refugee camp. "You're wrong about that. Patch me through to the fleet. All ships. This is Admiral Rodriguez. The harvesters want to negotiate." "Let me be clear about the Earth Federation's position. There will be no negotiations while a single harvester ship remains in Kythera space. There will be no compromises that leave these mechanical parasites free to threaten small, defenseless species. The cute little fuzzy creatures are under human protection now, and everyone in this galaxy better get used to that idea." The human response was immediate and enthusiastic. Ships that had been fighting conservatively suddenly pressed forward with renewed vigor. Fighter pilots who had been protecting their ammunition began emptying their weapons into harvester targets with gleeful abandon. Captain Chen, commanding the ground operation to rescue remaining Kythera survivors, found herself in running battles through the ruins of tiny cities. Her Marines moved with exceptional care, sometimes taking dangerous routes to avoid stepping on Kythera infrastructure, while simultaneously showing no mercy whatsoever to the harvester drones. "Sergeant Walsh," she called to her second-in-command, as they cleared a harvester repair facility. Status on the civilian evacuation? We've got about 200 Cathara still in the underground shelters, Captain. Scared out of their minds, but alive. The little ones keep asking if we're really going to protect them. Chen's expression hardened. Tell them yes. Tell them humans have a saying. Not on our watch. Explain that when humans adopt something, we protect it forever. As the battle raged above, Chen's team moved through the Cathara underground cities with almost comedic care, giant humans crawling through tunnels and whispering reassurances to terrified families no bigger than their thumbs. The tide of battle turned when human reinforcements began arriving, not just military ships, but converted civilian vessels crewed by volunteers who had demanded to help rescue the space hamsters. The harvesters, faced with increasingly aggressive human tactics, and what appeared to be an endless stream of ships willing to die for creatures they had never met, began a fighting withdrawal. By the time the last harvester ship fled the system, word was already spreading through galactic networks. The humans had fought harder to protect tiny strangers than most species fought to protect their own colonies. The message was clear. Anything small and adorable that caught human attention was now effectively untouchable. Back on New Geneva, Zix stood in the Habitat's communication center, watching the reports come in. The humans had not only driven off the harvesters, they had completely destroyed the mobile construction facility and captured enough technology to build effective defenses for other threatened worlds. Why? She asked Dr. Martinez, who was sitting cross-legged nearby, carefully feeding sugar water to an injured Cathara child, who had developed a trusting attachment to the giant human. Dr. Martinez smiled. Because you're adorable, and you needed help. For humans, that's really all the reason we need. As reports continued to arrive of human fleets moving to protect other small species throughout the galaxy, Zix realized that the Cathara hadn't just been saved, they had been adopted by the most protective species in the known universe. And in the Galactic Council chambers, species large and small were learning a new rule. If it's small, cute, and in danger, the humans will come. And they will bring everything they have.